Why don't you start by telling us how you ended up in
Well,
Hamilton, and when you came to Hamilton, what did you find here?
we came to Hamilton because the Canadian Jewish Congress brought us over from Germany.
Who's us, Saul? Us.
A bunch. They tried, the government wouldn't allow in so easily, the Canadian government. So the Canadian Jewish Congress tried to get a special quota for orphans, and we were all orphans because we lost the families. So that's the way. So they brought us over from Germany. Everything was the Canadian Jewish Congress did it. So we came, for example, so it was every community got certain amount. Hamilton became 6, 3 boys, 3 girls.
Who came?
When we came here.
Who?
Well, whoever.
Do you know the names?
Well, the names I don't remember anymore. The names, but there was my. You don't remember Dave Altmark? No, you wouldn't. I had a partner in the business. I was never a butcher. I didn't know anything about it, but I had a partner. His parents were butchers in the whole country, and when he came, that's all he wanted to be in the butcher business. You remember a bit. And his sister Rosalind Solly, you remember? That was his sister. She also came with us. So we came, I would say the whole group, and we came over here, must have been about 70 or 80, something like that. Some went to Montreal, the state of Montreal, some went to Winnipeg and Windsor, and most of them in Toronto, because the city was bigger. And to Hamilton became 6 of us. I don't remember the name already. One guy, he became a baker in Toronto. He came to Hamilton. A short while later, he moved to Toronto.
How old were you, Saul?
At the time, about 20. And that's what happened. And then after the end of 1948, I also moved to Toronto. And then I was there for about 2 years. And I came across with this David Altmark, which he was my partner. Actually, he took me in for a partner. So I stayed in Toronto and he worked in Hamilton, but we were sort of in touch all the time, in contact. And then he wanted me to, and I did in Toronto, I learned upholstering, because I didn't have any trade, So after working for 2 years, I did better than he did here working for a butcher in Hamilton, because it was a better job at the time. But it wasn't such a good job. You had to chew the nails, in those days. But I needed to do something. So that's what happened. So anyhow, I lived in Toronto for 2 years. Then when I came back, he was working for this butcher. The fellow was an older man. He had a business in Kitchener at that time. Then he sold it and he bought the business like Hamilton Kosher.
What was his name?
His name was Mr. Berg. That's all I know, but he was an older man at the time. I guess he couldn't make any money. He couldn't read, he couldn't write. He had to depend on others, So he decided to sell the business. So then, at that time, like Dave Altmark, he went after me. And I said to him, I said, what do I know about the butcher business? See, I have a decent job. But he wouldn't take no for an answer. He kept on harping and this and that. Finally, I says, okay. So then, when I came already, I quit my job, but I could have gone back. The people that I worked for said, anytime you want to come back, the job is yours. So then I almost did, because when I did decide to come, and there was a lawyer by the same name, Saul Cohen. You know, he was an old time. He was born in Hamilton at the time. He was the lawyer, because we knew him. He knew him. And come to make the deal too. He says he wants to change his mind. He wasn't well, he was a sick boy. I didn't realize it at the time, you know. But finally we did buy it, because I said, look, I just quit the job, I'm not going back. You know, and so forth. So that's what happened, and then we started struggling little by little, you know. I learned.
I just wanted to find out about two things. The first is, when you came to Hamilton, did someone buy a house for you? Did you move into a house of your own?
No, a house of my own. The community tried to arrange places for everyone. For example, 6 came before us, like Mose Kaufman. I don't know if you know Mose Kaufman. You know Mose Kaufman? You've seen him in the shul a lot of times. It was him and a few other boys. We came in January of 48. They came December of 47. Okay, so then we were the second group that came. So they arranged, for example, like Paul Hanover, you know Paul Hanover? Now, his mother was a relation of mine, which I didn't know. When we came here, you know, as we came in, we stayed on Vine Street where the chapel used to be. That belonged to the Jewish center. There was one on John Street, and they used this one also. So that had, I don't know, 3, 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms upstairs.
So that's where you stayed?
That's where we stayed for about 3 weeks. And there was a Mrs. Smerlitt, an elderly lady. She used to look after, you know, cooking and shopping and everything for us. And then, so for 3 weeks we were there. And then in the meantime, they arranged for people who ever had a room to spare and so on. So Paul's parents, as I said, so how did I find out? When we came, so this Mrs. Merlick, you know, asking Yiddish, one best, you know, so up. I tell her, oh, she says, you got landslide here, the people from that town. I know, so we came on a Thursday. So Friday night, they took us to that time used to be the Hunter Street shul, we called it. You know, like the Jacob also, but they called it the Hunter Street. They took us services. Rabbi Burek was the rabbi. He was a young man in those days. And so they had a service Friday night, 8 o'clock, they had a service like every. So they took us. And Saturday, of course, we went to shul. And after the service, we came back to Vine Street, and Paul's brother came to pick me up, to take me. They didn't want us to go anywhere because we just here 2 days, 3 days, you know, strange. But you know, she knew them, so I went there for lunch. So I went for lunch, and I tell her, you know, my parents' name. They knew my parents well, you know, the same town. But I still don't know what kind of relation, but maybe second cousins or whatever, I don't know. And that's what happened. So I moved in to Paul's sister. She had a house. We lived on Bolt and Lock. And she only has one daughter. I don't know if she'd be older than you, I think. Anita Wilson, you wouldn't remember. But anyhow, so and she treated me like a mother, very, very nice, you know. And I got a job. They got me a job for Archie Levine. Do you hear that name? Archie Levine had a factory on Mary Street downtown, right across from the Century Theater used to be. So I got a job there. You know, it wasn't a nice job, but it was a job. They were taking the old clutches and to rebuild them those days. So they had to take them all apart with all the springs, you know, and everything, and all the grease. So we had a big tank, and we used to put it in a solution, and underneath was gas heat. They heated it up, the solution, you know. Then after a certain, maybe an hour or so, pull them out, and then, you know, wash them off.
So it took about 2 years before you got into the business?
About 3 years. 2 years? Wait a second, 48, 49, 53 years almost. Exactly 3 years. Because
and it was on King Street? You started on King Street?
No, we started on York Street. Right downtown, there were 3 delis there, and the same. York Street was the Jewish area at the time.
What was there besides you? Who else was there?
On York Street?
Yeah.
Lots of stores.
Do you remember any of
Well,
them?
sure, what's his name? Zach, Goldie Zach. They had him and his brother, they had a store, the family there. And then there was Boleslavsky, the deli. And then there was a deli right across where we were on York Street. Mr. Bill Cohen and L. Sachs. I know their name. And there was another deli. But when we came, I'm just trying to think, when I came back to the business to Hamilton, I guess somebody else bought it. It was Mrs. Zucker. They had, I think the Zuckers had it. They sold it to Bill and L, the deli.
How many butchers were there when you bought it?
When we bought the place, there was one more kosher and Gelber, because he wasn't under the Ashkucha at the time.
What was the name of your place?
Hamilton Kosher was always been, because the Lucha, they had it, and they sold it previously to Mr. Macklin. Charlie, the son's still around, Charlie Macklin. His father bought a butcher shop.
What were the other butcher shops called?
One was called Golden's. He came from Toronto because when Gelber wasn't anymore kosher, the community brought in this guy, this Abe Golden. So it was his butcher shop. It's right next to the A&P. There was an A&P there.
How come Gelber couldn't keep his hashgacha?
Apparently, the Rabbi Levine used to be the rabbi at the time. I didn't know what was going on then. I had no idea. But what happened in those days, he still had to sign kosher meat. There was no law in Canada. They could do whatever they want. Now it's different. Now the consumers tried it. The government couldn't do anything. The community tried, couldn't do anything. But after a while, the consumers complained to the government. If it says kosher, it should be kosher. The government maintained one thing. To them, if you say you're a rabbi, it's good enough for them. You could be a Reform rabbi. For example, there was a case in Winnipeg. The Jewish community tried to take the court, the butcher, because he's had a sign kosher and he wasn't, according to the kosher. So then, but the community lost because they had a sign kosher. As a matter of fact, in Toronto, it was the same thing. There was Chicago 58 was called. Salamis made it, and they had a kosher sign, and with a signature from a rabbi. Well, I guess he was a rabbi, could have been a form, I remember the story because we weren't allowed to buy from these guys. In those days, the only wholesaler there was to buy from, like cold cuts, salamis, hot dogs, was Greenspan.
Where was Greenspan from?
In Toronto.
What about Hebrew National? Is that kosher?
Yeah, but that's in the States. Those days you couldn't bring it in.
Because I remember Chicago 58 in my house.
That's
Where would
right.
your father buy that? From Boleslavsky's?
Yeah, Boslavsky, the delis carried it.
But it wasn't kosher.
Not, I don't know. I know we were not allowed to sell it from day one when we took over. We were only allowed to buy whatever the rabbis said, what the kashrus we had those days.
Who was on the Vada Kashrus?
All kinds of people. Some of them didn't even know anything about kosher, but they were about the kashrus. There was a Harold Bornstein used to be. He was Katz's, the old man Katz. You should remember the old man Katz.
But the son, or the grandson is still here.
Oh, there's lots of Katz's here.
No, Bornstein.
Oh, the son, yeah. Harold's son is still here, yeah. So he was, he at least knew something about it. And there was a Sam Paces used to be, Paces family. He was on the committee at one time. But then after that, it fell apart. They didn't, they couldn't do anything in those days. They had them, but you couldn't. It was like it was in Europe, let's say 100 years ago.
What changes when, like, in the 1950s,
right,
a new rabbi comes to Hamilton?
In the 50s, yeah, Rabbi Green came.
Yeah.
He came in 59, I believe.
Did that change everything or anything?
Slowly, it changed a lot.
Yeah.
Not immediately, but he did.
No.
In what way so?
Well, first of all, it changed. You never saw here kids with a kippah, young kids. But when he came, eventually, when he opened up the academy, that changed an awful lot. You never saw, like, when I used to go to Toronto, I lived there, I never saw this either in Toronto. But then my in-laws used to live on Arthur Bathurst. And, one time I used to go the weekend, during the week I wasn't there, but the weekend I see Strammels with that. I never used to see that before. It was new to me. Because in Hamilton we didn't see it. But after that, like later with the academies, a lot of the kids used to go with the kippahs and so on,
Sure.
As the attics became a little bit more stringent, let's
Right.
under Rabbi Green,
Yeah.
were you more under scrutiny as the population became more did they scrutinize you or did they always trust your hashgacha?
Oh, we had the hashgacha from the kashrut in Hamilton.
So it didn't really impact on your business
No, it
practice?
didn't make any difference. The same was, when we started, it was the same. We had the hashgacha of Rabbi Green and we had the mashgiach all the time. He used to hang around for a couple of hours and then would come back, but...
And when did you end up becoming the only butcher in town? How did that evolve?
That involved, it's like this, when they tried to clean up York Street, I don't know if you remember, to knock down all these properties, like where Gelber used to be, west of Caroline. And across used to be Delhi also. Mrs. Wine had a delicatessen there. And so he sold the city took over all the properties. So they gave up the business. They never went back to business. But till then, Morris used to run the business, and the old men too. So when they knocked everything down, then there was another butcher in Westdale next to the confection, what's the store? Hopkins. Hopkins used to be. He sold it too. So next to Hopkins, there was this Golden. Of course, he sold it to his brother-in-law, but it was still called Golden's kosher. So, and then it was a very small store, and I don't know, he got fed up with it somehow. He tried to sell it. He couldn't sell it to anybody. So he sold it to a non-kosher. A guy used to work for him, just a regular butcher shop. It wouldn't last. For a small butcher shop, non-kosher, what are you going to do there, AMP was right across the road and so forth. So then they closed up, I guess. And then Gelber went out of the business, so we became the only one.
When Gelber was in business, how much Jewish business was he getting as opposed to how kosher were people? Did they care if it was really Hashgacha or not?
Those people who bought from him didn't care.
Obviously.
He told them it's kosher, so that's good enough, you know. Don't forget, a lot of the family used to buy from him, like the Goldblatts, the Levys, you know. She was, Levi's, I guess, family with them. And that's all, but he never had much to do with them. I knew them. And then, so that was in 1962, we moved to Westdale, because that was before. It wasn't our property, so it didn't matter, but eventually we would have to move anyway. So we moved to Westdale, into the same corner that I've been there ever since.
When you came to Hamilton, you became a member of the Addis?
When I came back to Hamilton, I was in Hamilton for a year, right? Then I moved to Toronto. So at that time I wasn't a member anywhere. But then when I went into the business, I became a member in the Addis. And my partner, he was a member at the Jacob, because, see, what happened was, he had this sister. She was 9 years old. And did you remember the Teitelbaums anyway? You wouldn't know them. I know that was for your time. These people, they were elderly already at the time. When we came, I would say, he must have been the late 50s. And they lived in the East End, like Gladstone Avenue, it's east of Wentworth, something like that. And they had no children. So when they came, and Rosalind was, as I said, was 9 years old at the time, so they wanted to adopt her. So they did adopt her, really officially adopt her legally, like. And of course, and the brother, he was of the same age as me, so they took them both in. They didn't, because they didn't want to split them up, and they didn't mind. But he wasn't adopted. They considered him just like, you know, the same in the family. But she was officially adopted. So that's what happened. So what happened was, so they adopted her, and then they moved from the east over here. That's what happened. So that's the reason we got around like this here. So that's about it.
Okay.
So, if you had to characterize what the Jewish community in Hamilton was like when you first came here, if you had to describe to people the reception that you got when you came.
Oh, we had a wonderful reception. It treated us very nicely. And of course, it also depends who you talk to. Some of the fellas or the girls, they were never happy. They thought everything is coming to them. There were all kinds of people. I moved in with this Mrs. Wolfson. I've never had, she very nice to me, and okay. And after when I came back, and I left, so somebody else moved in. Another boy she took in. And when I came back to the business, it was 2 years later. So the place, she didn't have the place, so I lived someplace else for a while. But then after, like, for example, later on, when I, you know, we started the 50s, 53 or so, about a car at that time. They never had a car, they never drove, like her husband never drove. So they used to go to Buffalo here, and those days, here Sundays was nothing. There's no sport, no nothing. So I used to they wanted to go to Buffalo, I used to drive them and so on, you know. So it was like family, you know, very, very, very close.
Were there people who weren't happy? And the reason I'm asking is because I know that Arthur Wise,
Yeah.
hates Federation. Nobody knows why.
Is that
Something
right?
happened when he first came here. I
Could
think he
be.
felt that he wasn't supported.
I couldn't tell you, I have no idea.
Were there other people that
Sure, I'm sure there
weren't happy?
was.
What were they complaining about? What was their...
I really don't know. I know in Toronto was the same thing. When I moved to Toronto, there's a lot of the kids that came over at the same time, you know, like I said, 70 or so at least. And majority of them stayed in Toronto. Or even if they went to Winnipeg, they'd come. I mean, you could go wherever you want, you know. So most of them wound up in Toronto. So, you know, a lot of the had uncles, a family, they all complaining like this. They want this, you know.
Was there community? Was there like a Hebrew-free loan? Like, did anyone take out loans in the community?
I have no. I'll tell you, I wasn't at the time ready to do things like this, so I don't know. Later on, I know there used to be the Edes Israel had a loan. I used to belong to it after. I didn't need the money, but to borrow, because when we started the business, we managed. I was single at the time. My partner was single, you know. Whenever we drew $25 a week, we managed.
When you think back to your years in the business, you will remember that no one ordered a thicker steak than Cyril Levitt. Remember when?
Oh, that was later on already. I know.
Like this.
I know.
It's all used to.
Oh yeah.
Unbelievable.
That was later on,
We used
yeah.
to sit and eat.
You got to remember, when we started in the business, the meat wasn't as nice as we got later on.
Yeah.
Because they didn't chef the same animals. It was like really, you know, plain stuff.
And so you must have been in a unique position. You must have known everybody.
Well, we had a lot of customers. I knew almost everybody. You know, even people which didn't shop by us, we still knew them. Because they came in occasionally.
So I asked you, what kind of meat did so-and-so like? What was their
Oh, I used to know. Now, at least I forget now, but I used to know, sure.